Hello and welcome. Let us now talk about ethical decision making, which is chapter 5 of the textbook, using PowerPoint slides so you can review and repeat them over and over again for a better understanding of the variables involved in the concepts in the research that is presented in this chapter. There are many objectives here, and first of all, the chapter provides you a model for ethical decision making in business. It helps you examine ethical issue intensity and its importance in the ethical decision making process. It introduces individual factors that influence business ethical decision making. The chapter is also going to introduce organizational factors that influence ethical decision making for you. It explores the role of opportunity in ethical decision making in business. And finally, the chapter talks about normative as well as descriptive elements of ethical decision making. And it helps you understand and examine the importance of morals and values in ethical decision making in any organization. The framework for understanding ethical decision making in business gives you the variables of ethical issue intensity, individual factors, organizational factors, and the opportunity that we might have to do that which is illegal or do that which is legal and ethical perhaps. All of those variables influence business ethics evaluation and intention of individuals. Ultimately, that leads to ethical or unethical behavior at any given time on the part of the employee or the manager. So let us look at the drivers and influences of business ethics evaluation in a person's intention to either behave ethically or unethically. That's what this chapter is about. Let us now discuss the framework for ethical decision making. The various elements that you should be aware of relates to ethical awareness, intensity, and moral intensity. Ethical awareness is your ability to perceive whether a situation or decision has an ethical dimension to it. Ethical issue intensity is the relevance or importance of an event or decision in the eyes of the individual, the work group, or even the organization. Personal and temporal in character to accommodate certain values, beliefs, and needs and perceptions, the special characteristics of the situation, and the personal pressures prevailing at a particular place and time is what the ethical issue intensity is all about. Moral intensity is individuals' perceptions of social pressure and the harm that they believe their decision will have on others at any given time. Gender is an issue that seems to have a huge influence at times, but at other times it's found to have no difference whatsoever. In many aspects, there are no differences between men and women with regards to the ethical decision making. However, your book does emphasize that sometimes females do seem to have higher level of ethical maturity compared to men. With regards to education, those who are more familiarized with the ethical decision-making process due to their education or experience, they're more likely to spend more time examining and selecting different alternatives to any ethical dilemma or issue at a given time. In terms of nationality, it's impossible to state that ethical decision-making in any organization context will differ significantly among workers of different nationalities. Nonetheless, nationality seems to be an important influence on how we're socialized in terms of our decisions and behaviors toward various dilemmas. In terms of age variable, we know that older employees with experience have greater knowledge to deal with complex industry-specific ethical issues. Younger managers are far more influenced by organizational culture. So, do you see experience and older age as an asset when it comes to ethical decision making? Or do you see it as a problem or a barrier toward ethical decision making. Also, the variable of locus of control basically tells you how people view themselves in relation to power in the workplace. Those who have an external control, they seem to go with the flow. They seem to believe that life events are due to uncontrollable forces. Those who are on the internal control side of locus of control, they tend to believe that they control the events in their lives by their own level of effort, skill, experience, education in learning over time. There are organizational factors as well. So conditions in the organization seem to either limit or permit ethical or unethical behavior at times. Organizational factors result from conditions that either provide reward, whether it's internal or external, or they fail to erect barriers against unethical behavior in the department or in the organization or organizational culture. Internal rewards is basically feelings of goodness and personal worth generated by performing altruistic or ethical acts. External reward is what an individual expects to receive from others in the social environment in terms of overt social approval or status or even esteem. Individual immediate job context basically means where a person works, whom they work with, in the nature of the work itself. That's what we mean by the context of the job. Ethical business issues and dilemmas involve problem-solving situations where the rules governing decisions are at times vague or unclear, or they could be in conflict with one another. It's not always immediately clear whether a decision is ethical or not, because there's no magic formula that ethical business issues or dilemmas can be plugged into to get a solution. It would be nice if we had a formula that basically clearly told you that 2 + 2 = 4. With regards to ethical decisions, we do not have that type of mathematics or equations in place. Even if a person means well, most business people make ethical mistakes. Not because they're bad people, but because they have lack of awareness or standards or experience. There's no substitute for critical thinking in the ability to take responsibility for our own decisions. So if you're always feeling uneasy or guilty about a decision that you've made or decisions that you make on a day-to-day basis, we need to change that behavior to reduce these feelings. This change can reflect a person's values or morals shifting to fit the decision, or the person changing his or her decision type the next time a similar situation occurs. Keep in mind that the road to success depends on how business people define success. If we define success in terms of only earning more and more money and trying to increase profits at all costs, then we become greedy. You may have a lot of money, but unfortunately you may not be seen as an ethical person. On the other hand, if you see success as the balance between making profits without hurting other people, then obviously you'll be more concerned about the impact of your decisions on other individuals. And you might be seen as a more ethical person. Ethical decision-making model does not help in determining if a business decision is right or wrong. They provide insight about ethical decision-making in businesses. Business ethics involves value judgments and collective agreements about what is acceptable pattern of behavior in the department or in the organization. Gaining an understanding of the factors that make up ethical decisions helps differentiate between an ethical issue and an ethical dilemma that may come up in your workplace. The normative considerations in ethical decision making emphasizes basically how organizational decision makers should approach an issue. Should is the key word here. So this is different from the descriptive approach, which examines how organizational decision makers actually approach ethical decision making. So the normative approach in business ethics revolves around the standards of behavior within the company, as well as within the industry, or the code of ethics that the profession seems to have. Normative rules and standards are based on individual moral values as well as the collective values of the organization. The normative approach for business ethics is concerned with general ethical values that are implemented into the business. Concepts like fairness and justice are highly important in normative structure. Strong normative structures and organizations are positively related to ethical decision making. We tend to see institutions as being the foundation for normative value. Government, religion, and educational institutions heavily influence the creation of values, norms, and conventions which are practiced by not only members of the society, but members of a specific organization. Keep in mind, when a worker comes into the workplace, he or she does not leave his or her societal or national values outside the door. They bring it with them in order to make decisions. Industry competition, as Dr. Michael Porter would say, are determined by barriers to entry into the industry, the available substitutes for the product produced by the industry rivals, the power of the industry rivals over their customers, and the power of the industry rivals' suppliers over their rivals. In terms of implementation of decisions, keep in mind principles and values seem to have a huge influence as well. Philosopher John Rawls believed justice principles were beliefs that everyone could accept. He talked about the veil of ignorance. Rawls examined how people would formulate principles if they were uncertain about their future position in society. In other words, not knowing what position you'll hold, what kind of society would you have in terms of decision making that would shape eventually your day-to-day living in that society, without knowing whether you're a man or a woman, a doctor, a laborer, an athlete, strong, weak, tall, short, white, black, speak English, speak maybe a different language around the globe. So again, not knowing what you would be or have, how would you want society to make decisions? In terms of veil of ignorance, imagine that you're faced with the task of creating a new and just society. You are in the dark about your status in the new society. You do not know if you will be rich or poor. You do not know if you will be healthy or sick. You do not know your face or gender or sexual orientation or religion. Not knowing any of these things, what sort of society would you create? What sort of government would it have? How would its laws be enacted? What would its public policies be like? John Rawls thought he knew what kind of a society you could create in such a situation under the veil of ignorance. He called it original position, in which you are behind this metaphorically veil of ignorance about your status, not knowing what your status will be in the future. Therefore, you would create a just society in which everyone is treated fairly. So again, it goes back to the idea of doing unto others as you would have them do unto you. If somebody else is a victim today, chances are very, very good that you or your family members or relatives might be that same victim tomorrow. Would you want other people to treat this person the way you're treating a victim or a person today? Or would you want others to treat your family members or you differently than the way you treat others? So again, this is veil of ignorance thoughts in relation to maybe do unto others as you would have them do unto you, the golden rule. So principles of justice by Rawls states that the liberty principle or equality principle, where each person has basic rights that are compatible to the basic liberties of others. The difference principle states that economic and social equalities or inequalities should be arranged to provide the most benefit to the least advantaged individuals in any given environment or in society. The theory of justice basically states that justice is the first virtue of social institutions. The primary subject of justice is the way the major social institutions accomplish two goals: distribute fundamental rights and duties, and determine the division of advantages from social cooperation. In other words, justice should be seen as fairness. Here, each person is to have an equal right to the most extensive basic liberty compatible with a similar liberty for others. Social and economic inequalities are to be arranged so that they are reasonably expected to be to everyone's advantage, and they should be attached to positions in offices that are open to all individuals in society. When it comes to implementing principles and core values, companies convert basic principles into their core values. They provide the abstract ideals that are distinct from individual values and daily operational procedures. They can include operating in a sustainable manner, collaboration and teamwork, and avoiding bribery. They provide a blueprint into the company's goals and how it views ethical decision making. So principles can be a very strong guide into our core values in our day-to-day decision making processes. In terms of principles and values, as you're looking at the differences between the two, principles are widely accepted, used to develop values and standards. Principles establish pervasive boundaries for behavior and valued across cultures and across nationalities. Values seem to be more subjective and they're related to personal choices. Values are used to develop norms in a specific environment or culture. Values provide guidance to organizations for their day-to-day behavior, and values differ across cultures, across firms, and across individuals. So while values seem to be more temporary, principles are more long-lasting. For example, sometimes people say there's the principle of gravity. What goes up must come down. Well, that principle does not change, obviously, when we're going from United States to Afghanistan or to Nigeria or to Spain or to France. So the principle stays the same. However, values might change. So values can be long-lasting. However, we do have more control over our values, so we can acquire new values or maybe rank two different values a little bit differently given circumstances in situations where the variables change or the pressures or the economics or the politics seem to change. Remember that leaders do influence others, so oftentimes leaders have certain principles that they encourage others to live by, but they also live by it through their own day-to-day behaviors. For example, in South Asia, Mahatma Gandhi was one of those global leaders who emphasized certain principles that should be emphasized universally. So he called it the 7 dangers of human virtue, which would be wealth without work, pleasure without conscience, knowledge without character, business without ethics, science without humanity, religion without sacrifice, in politics without principle. This is why ethics is so important in all elements of our lives, not just the business part alone. And this is why principle is so important, whether it's in business or whether it's in politics or whether it's when you're living as an individual citizen in the community where you live. Regarding understanding ethical decision making, we always emphasize that top-level support for ethical behavior is instrumental in helping employees engage in their personal approaches to ethical decision making. Normative perspectives set forth ideal goals to which organizations should aspire toward. Knowledge about ethical decision making does help in making good decisions. Good luck living with important values that you adhere to and with principles that guide your behavior every single day. Remember to please evaluate your ethical values. Remember that ethical behavior is a skill, so you need to police, evaluate, and improve your ethical muscles every single day so you can manage and guide others effectively in your department, in your organization, and in society in general. Good luck.